Stonehenge. Talking compost, we had some questions. What's the cheapest way to get into composting your own stuff? Now, the cheapest way is just throw it in a pile. But at some point, we want a little structure to our pile, and that's why I'm showing off this pallet design here. It's just simply 4 pallets ratchet strapped together, and with some straw at the bottom. Now, the straw and the pallets allow for airflow as we build this compost mix. So what is compost mix? The formula that you hear a lot of times is 3 browns to 1 green. So what does that mean? Brown is simply like dried material, like in this case we're using straw. And where green material, we've talked about composting in place with the chop and drop system. That's the same. We're adding 1 green on top of the 3 browns underneath it, building up that layered mass. But here we're doing it a little bit differently, and it's a little bit more functional because we're taking scraps from the kitchen and things that we don't use in cooking or things that have gone bad in the garden, and instead of composting them in place where they are or letting them reseed, we're taking them, putting in this pile, and this will give us an additive to our potting soil. It allows us to make compost tea, it allows us to fertilize these fruit trees, and there's just a whole lot of benefits from building a compost pit. Of course, we advocate feeding this mostly to the chickens because we get more stacking functions out of that deal, but building a compost pit similar to this one is a great start. So all we do is, at the end of the day, we collect our scraps, and this bucket just lives in the house. We fill it up, and then we come out and dump it. Typically, we've been dumping it in that compost turner down there by the house, but it does the same thing. This is just a lot cheaper. So when we have our browns here, we add our greens. And now, as that continues to pile up, we'll just put more browns on top. So this might take, a month to fill up, a couple weeks to fill up, but as it sits and as air flows in, then the compost, then bacteria will start breaking this down and turning it into like that rich, fertile soil that we want, that we can add to our plants or grow things in our garden with. But it's a very easy process. It just takes time. All things will rot, but by controlling the equation a little bit, we can get more nutrient-dense soil and have a much better product. So we need airflow. I've seen some people put in sticks in the bottom to kind of get this mix up off the ground, or have a pallet at the bottom, but I found that that's difficult to turn. At some point, we're gonna break this pallet down by undoing our ratchet straps and turn this, adding more oxygen into the mix, and then turn it over into another pit. We can let it sit forever if we're not looking for like the most effective design. But by adding oxygen with like a digging fork and turning it, we can get that to be a whole lot faster. When you see these compost turners, those every day we're turning the crank, and that's adding oxygen in. And actually they advertise from food waste to usable compost in like 14 days with that system. I think that's too much to spend a lot of times for this same output. So just put your greens, put your browns in. Over time, I'm going to show you how this pile develops and becomes really nice dirt for planting. Here's how we design this compost system. And this isn't my design, this is a design that's commonly used, but it's simply 4 pallets. There's 2 on the inside, 2 on the outside, and 2, well, this is 4 ratchet straps that are tensioned together in 2 sections. You can see that these have been ratcheted, and that keeps the pallets together. You could tie these with ropes, you could tie a rope all the way around, but the takeaway here is we have something that contains our composted greens and browns. In this case we use pallets because they were available. I've used cattle panels before, but pallets, they're probably the best. A ratchet strap, we typically use it for tying things down to the trailer when we're transporting, but in this case we've just wrapped it around, slid the tab through the hole, and then as you crank down on these, it applies tension to our compost bin. While these pallets are keeping our compost mixture in, it's also keeping critters out. It's hard for like raccoons to climb through that. They'll get in there, but they're not going to get all the way to the center where we put the nice tasty vegetables that raccoons or possums might like to eat. So don't get caught up about the mixture that people talk about all the time. It's 1 green to 3 browns. Everything rots if it's given enough time to sit there. So don't get too caught up in, but do keep that in mind when you're adding stuff. So for every 1 green, you need some brown in there too. 1 green to 3 browns. So this will probably take a month, maybe longer. The things that we're looking for are oxygen flow and temperature. These things will get up to be, they'll be really hot, and actually you can see like steam rising from the compost pits. That's how we know that things are working. When we stop seeing that steam, it's probably time to turn it and get that reaction going again. But I hope that once we get this thing filled, it'll be a month before it's turned into really nice dirt. And that's if I decide to turn it on the regular. But it goes really quick. That's the takeaway. So you're using expensive stuff that you buy at the grocery, you eat it, and then the waste material goes into this pit, and it gives you more like purchasing power for the money that you spend at the grocery store. So if you're sad about the high cost of groceries, build your compost pit, and you'll be saving money and then reutilizing to build your own system of growing food. That's abundance. So it's beneficial to maybe cover these with a tarp, if you know it's going to rain particularly. That way the rain's not going to hit this compost pile and then leach all the great nutrients that you've built and bacteria that's composted into, the waterways. So cover it with a tarp and you'll get a little bit extra out of it. Don't fall for like compost starter. You don't need to buy anything. Just throw all your stuff there. The bacteria will come. You don't need to be spending extra money on some microbial mix to make your compost even better.
Why?
Because you're spending extra money. You don't need to spend extra money to make things rot. Things are going to rot on their own. They've been rotten for millennia. But, I don't know. The big box store doesn't need your money on this one.